Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another DxO webinar. Let me get my screen going here, make sure everything's working. I'm your host, Photo Joseph, and today we are talking about DxO PureRAW. This is another foray into the latest app from DxO. If you haven't seen this, it is an amazing tool, what it can do. And I'm going to show you top to bottom what we can do with this thing. We're going to get into a little bit of advanced tips, but today is meant to be an introduction. So we are going to cover the basics and ensure that everybody's on the same page. Now, if you have seen one of these webinars already, don't feel like, ooh, there's nothing here for me. I am going to do some more advanced tips as well. And in fact, for those of you who were here last time, I had an issue where I couldn't show something, but now I'm going to be able to do that today. So we're going to get through all of that. But first, a little bit of slides, a little bit of housekeeping. The title of today's show, of course, is, as you can see on your screen, the basics of using DxO PureRAW for the best results with Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom Classic. So those are the two apps that we will be jumping in and out of. Pretty straightforward here today. We are going to be, again, really going through the basics. We're going to open up some images in PureRAW, explain how this works, what the interface does, how you use the tool, talk about some different workflows specifically with Photoshop and Lightroom Classic, and then get in a little bit of advanced tips as well. So that's that. With all that said, let me get out of here, jump over to PureRAW, which I suppose I should probably relaunch right now, and let's get this thing going. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is PureRAW. Very simple, very clean. There's not a whole lot to it, and that's okay. That's by design. There's actually not much that you need to know about it because it is just a simple little tool that does one thing very well and then gets out of your way. So let me back up to the beginning, if you will, and explain what PureRAW is and why you might want to consider putting this into your workflow. So a lot of people who are already using PhotoLab 4 have asked, well, is this a whole new thing? Do I need PureRAW? I already have PhotoLab. The simple answer to that is no, you don't. This tool, PureRAW, is a piece of PhotoLab that has been taken out as a standalone product with a new interface and some new workflow tricks. It really comes down to convenience. If you do decide to purchase this and you already have PureRAW, it is all about convenience, but you're not going to be gaining any additional functionality. And I want to make sure that's clear for anyone who is considering this. If you already have PhotoLab, then this isn't going to give you anything more except, like I said, a little bit of convenience. That said as well, the functionality in here and what's in PhotoLab are mirrored, and anytime there's changes to these changes will happen simultaneously, so you don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to have the latest version? You always will. Okay, with all that said, what is it? What has been taken out of PhotoLab and set as a standalone app? It's effectively two things. It is the raw processing, the entire raw processing, decoding workflow of pipeline, I should say, of PhotoLab, and also the denoising of DeepPRIME. So let's start with the raw pipeline. So the whole idea behind raw decoding, whether you're using PhotoLab or PureRAW, or you're using Adobe Photoshop, or you're using Apple Photos, you're using Capture One, or whatever app you're using to process your raw photos, every raw processing engine you can think of it like a chef. It is a unique chef with its unique opinions and unique tastes, whom if you give 10 different chefs all the exact same ingredients and say, go make me a chocolate chip cookie, you're going to get back 10 different chocolate chip cookies. Every processor is different. Every chef is different. You're going to get the same basic thing. You're going to get that chocolate chip cookie, but it's always going to be a little bit different. And that is exactly what happens with raw photos. A raw photo that comes out of your camera, that raw file, don't even think of it like a photo, because it's not a photo yet. It's just data. It is literally raw data. When you get that raw data out of your camera, it has to be turned into an image, into a photo. And that's what the raw processing engine does. And this is why when you look at the same photo, the exact same photo, out of a bunch of different raw engines, they will all look a little bit different. It's still the same picture. It's still a chocolate chip cookie, but they're just going to look a little bit different. And sometimes one will be clearly better than another. Oh, that one's got way less noise than the other. Oh, the colors are just more better, although I guess that's subjective. But there will be clear differences that are maybe obviously better, but a lot of times it is very subjective. I always like to reference Capture One for this. Capture One is very popular among studio and portrait photographers because of the way that Capture One handles skin tones. People like the way that the colors are when they come out of Capture One. That's awesome. You like using Capture One, cool. We're not going to stop you from doing that, because what we are doing with PureRAW is we are doing the raw processing, the raw decoding, the lens corrections, the chromatic aberration removal, the noise removal, and all that. But what we are not doing is the color processing. So this is a super important part of it. What you have with PureRAW is a raw decoding engine that applies the DxO's famous DxO optics modules. These are over 60,000, and yes, that's an actual number, over 60,000 individual modules, and you'll see how this works in a moment here, that are applied to very specific camera and lens combinations. These are modules that have been painstakingly created in the labs at DxO, and those little files get applied to your raw image along with all the other magic sauce that's in the raw processing engine, and you get a really, really good clean file out of it. That's the whole idea. You get this really good clean file. If you were using Photolab, then you would have the DxO color management, the color processing applied to it. But when you take it out of PureRAW, you don't. So what you get is that clean image, distortion correction, noise removal, chromatic aberration removal, demosaicing, all the good things that are in there, but you don't get the color processing. That is still handled by whatever app you want to use. So again, PureRAW is just the raw engine. We send our raw photos into PureRAW, and what we get back out of PureRAW is also a raw photo. It's not a TIFF, it's not a JPEG. I mean, you can make a JPEG, but it's not a TIFF, it is not a PNG, it is a raw DNG file, digital negative file. It is still raw, and you'll see more as we get into the demo what that actually means and how it actually works. But effectively, you are getting a cleaner, better raw file than you put into it. Then you take that DNG and you open it in Photoshop or Capture One or Affinity Photo or whatever you like, and you let that raw processor handle the color, and now you've got kind of the best of both worlds. So that's the idea behind it. Now, I said that there's two parts to PureRAW. There's the whole raw processing that I just explained, plus there's DeepPRIME. And DeepPRIME is the noise removal engine that is in Photolab 4 and of course now in PureRAW. And for those of you who've been using Photolab for a while, you might remember Prime. It was originally just Prime up through version 3 of Photolab. And Prime was just a absolutely mind-blowing noise removal tool. It was great. Then with DxO Photolab 4, we got PureRAW. Then we got DeepPRIME, the next version of Prime. And it made the old Prime look like an Adobe product. I mean, it was so good that it just was a night and day difference. It was unbelievable to see how much better it had gotten, even though it was already so incredibly good. So DeepPRIME gave us just an absolutely incredible level of noise reduction, even at really, really high ISO. And of course, we're going to see all of this today as well. So now you've got these two things inside of PureRAW, a raw processing engine along with DeepPRIME to give you this really good quality, really clean DNG that you then take to whatever other app you want. So that's what it is. Now, because it is another step in the workflow, DxO has worked really hard at making this workflow process very simple. I'm not going to show you a ton of different workflows today. I actually have a video at that website I showed you earlier, photojoseph.com/getDxO. You'll see a video right at the top there that goes through a variety of different workflows. And I encourage you to watch that, especially if the workflow that you're looking for isn't covered in today's presentation. But there is, suffice it to say, there is an easy way to inject PureRAW into your workflow. And the beautiful thing is that you can choose to process all of your photos through it, or more likely, you're just going to process individual photos one at a time, the ones that you think will really benefit from PureRAW or the ones that simply need PureRAW's help. So with all that said, let's get into a little demo of how this actually works, and we're going to start looking at a few different images. All right, I'm going to turn my camera off. I will keep turning it on and off as we go, depending on what we're doing here. But for now, let's go ahead and jump into PureRAW. I'm going to go over to the Finder where I have a bunch of different photos here. These are all raw from different cameras. There's a bunch of Canon files in here. There's some Lumix files in here. There's, let's see here, looks like I saw an NEF somewhere. If there's a Nikon file, so a variety of different images in here. I'm going to start with this one here. This is an old Canon file of a 5D Mark II, I think. And I want to process this photo. So I'm just going to drag and drop this in. And you'll see it pops up this thing that says DxO Optics module. Now, I'm bringing this one up first. I guess I should do a different one first, but this one is a bit of an anomaly in that the software isn't totally sure exactly what lens was attached because of limited metadata in the file. So if you ever see this, pop up, basically the software is going, ooh, okay, in this case, it says Canon EOS 20D, so it knows the camera, and then it shows Canon EF 14mm, Samyang 14mm, Sigma 14mm. It's going, okay, I know it's a 14 mil. It looks like it knows that it's an f2.8, but it's not quite sure what brand. And that's probably because the camera didn't store a complete metadata picture for the file. And so it's going, well, we know this much about it, but the rest we don't know. And so the software is saying, which one is it that you shot with? Do you remember? Now, I know I shot this picture a really long time ago, but I also know that I own this lens, this top one. I don't own these other ones. So that is the one that it is. Actually, no, I take that back. It's this one. It's not the Mark II. It's the original 14 2.8. So that's one that I'm going to choose, and then I hit download. Now, once that's downloaded, that's it. I hit save, and that file is downloaded and ready to go, and I'll never have to download that again. So this is the photo. If we open this up now, you can see what this looks like. This is, it's quite a bit of noise. You can kind of see it. In fact, let's zoom in 1-to-1 here. You can see if we look up in the sky here, there is a lot of digital noise. This is like I said, a 20D file. I think this was shot probably about 10 to 15 years ago, probably closer to 15. Looks like it's not super sharp in here. There's some work that can be done to this. So let's see what PureRAW will do to this. So I select the file, and then I click on Process Photos. This is the one interface element that you need to look at, the one interface element where you can change things, but honestly, you're probably not going to change much of anything here, if anything at all. First of all, you have your raw processing. And this really should probably be called denoising. What method of denoising do you want? HQ, which is high quality, which is the default basic denoising. Do you want the prime denoising, which is the old prime algorithm, or do you want DeepPRIME, the new prime algorithm? Pretty obviously, we're going to go DeepPRIME. We want the best. Output format. What do you want out of this? Do you want a DNG, that's that raw file, or do you want a JPEG? It's not much reason to ever go to JPEG. I'm imagining this is here for folks who just want to batch process a bunch of photos and get a JPEG out of it. But honestly, the whole point of doing this is to have that raw photo. So we're going to stick with DNG. And then you choose where you want the photos to go. What is the destination folder? By default, it is going to be a DxO folder in the original images folder. So that means that we are going to see a new folder in here called DxO, and the photo is going to go in there. Or you can choose a custom folder if you want. That's totally up to you. So again, we're going to leave everything at the default: DeepPRIME, DNG, DxO folder. Click the process button and let it tear through. Now this is DeepPRIME. So DeepPRIME is processor intensive, but you can see it's actually pretty fast. Now there's two reasons it's fast. One of them is because this is an older 5D Mark II file. It's actually quite small, 16 megapixel maybe. Anyway, it's a smaller file. Maybe it's a 5D Mark I. Anyway, it's a small file. Plus, we have a pretty ripping fast machine. This is on a Mac Pro. So if your machine isn't as fast as this, don't feel badly. Something's not wrong. It's just that DeepPRIME does actually take some time to process, but the results are totally worth it, as you are going to see right now. Okay, processing is done. What do I want to do? I can just go to the Finder and look at the image in the Finder. I can click on View Results to do a comparison in here, or I can choose to export this off to another app. I'm going to go ahead and click on View Results because I want to see the difference here inside of Photolab. It opens up as inside of PureRAW. It opens up as a split screen. You see down at the bottom, original RAW on the left, processed DNG on the right. I'm going to go ahead and zoom into this to 1-to-1 and pan down so we can really see this. And let's just start by looking at the sky. There is a very obvious difference in the noise level in the sky in there, which is pretty awesome. Let's look at the building. Look at the architecture in here. The difference in the sharpness between these two is really astounding. There's also some lens correction happening. You can tell, actually, I'll just zoom out of this. Let's go out all the way. And in fact, I'm going to get out of the compare mode, and I'm going to now push this button here, which is a toggle to toggle between the before and after. It's funny because if you look at the original RAW, you think, which is what we're looking at now, you can see again at the bottom, it says original RAW. You think, yeah, great, those lines are straight, it's fine, cool. But then I look at the process one, and it kind of straightens things, and now as I toggle back and forth, you go, oh yeah, there's definitely some bulging happening here that PureRAW has corrected. All right, cool, so that's good. So now the image is straighter lines, there's less distortion in there, and overall it's looking pretty nice and clean. So that's cool. So this is now that's my new processed image. So I'm ready to work on this and take it wherever I want to. So in this case, let's say I want to edit this in Photoshop. The image is selected. I can either right click on it and choose export to application, or I can go to the button up here where it says export to, click the button, export to, and I can choose where I want it to go. I can send it to Lightroom, which is the Lightroom CC, the new cloud-based Lightroom. I can send it to Lightroom Classic, to Photoshop, the 2021, the latest Photoshop. I don't have Elements installed, so it's not an option, but if it was, that would be there. And then you can actually add any app that you want to this list. So photos, that's Apple Photos, I've added, Affinity Photo, I added. You simply select custom software here, and then once you do that, it shows up in the list. But in this case, I'm gonna let it go to Photoshop 2021 and click on the export button, and it is going to launch this into Photoshop. But what's really interesting about it is it's not gonna go straight into Photoshop. It is actually going to go into ACR, or Adobe Camera Raw, first. Why would it go to ACR? Because it's a raw file. DNG is raw. So we are now looking at the raw file, and you can already see the color differences. In fact, let me see if I can rearrange my window just so. Let's see if I can do this. Let's open this up and let me pan this over, squish this. There we go. That's close enough. So you can see, let's hide that. There we go. You can see a very distinct color difference between these two. That's because on the left, we are not having any color processing applied. It's just kind of a, I guess, a generic color profile. But on the right, we're seeing Adobe's color profile applied to this. If I open this up in Apple Photos, it would look differently. If I opened it in Capture One, it would look differently. So this is the Adobe color profile that has been applied to it. Great, let's go ahead and make this nice and big again. So it's got the Adobe color, and you can even see right here, profile Adobe color, and I could change it, right? Because it's raw. I can choose whatever color profile I want on this thing. I could even go to like an Adobe monochrome profile if you wanted to. It's actually be kind of cool for this photo. So I got that in there. All right, we're gonna actually leave it at that. And now, you know what, I'm gonna go with the color. Let's go with the color in there. And I can change color balance, color temperature on here if I wanted to. Let's see if I can get something that's a little bit more natural looking. Actually, that looks pretty good like that. Yeah, I mean, a little bit bluish, but I mean, it was shot at night, so I guess that's fair. All right, cool, we're gonna leave it at that. And yeah, we're good to go. So I'm gonna click on open. Now, if I just click open, then this is going to render out as pixels, and we are going to have pixels in Photoshop, which means anything I do to those pixels will be permanently altered. Or what I can do, and this is my personal preference, is to go to open as object. And that will open this as a smart object inside of Photoshop on a new smart object layer, which means that I can go back into the raw engine at any time. So let's bring this down to size. See, if I double click on this layer here, it brings me back into the Camera Raw where I can continue to make changes. So say I decide that I don't want that white balance shift. So I go back to there, I change it, click OK again, and it's going to render back into Photoshop with that white balance applied. So this is a super, super important part of how this works. You can take that DNG file. By all means, you can open it into ACR, render it out as pixels, and then off you go. But if you want that ultimate flexibility, that totally non-destructive workflow, then opening it as a smart object is the smart way to go. And if you think about opening this in something like Lightroom Classic, in Lightroom, it's always non-destructive, right? All the sliders and adjustments that you do in Lightroom are non-destructive, so you always have that original raw file, in this case the DNG, to go back to and make changes to at any time. Capture One works the same way, but then Apple Photos works the same way. But then you'll get to a point where you might say send it off to a filter, like to a knit collection filter. And if you're inside of Lightroom Classic and you do that, it's what you're going to get back is a TIFF file. Now there's other workflows around there where you can use the new layered TIFF files and get into the original work that was done, but that's not for today's demo. Out of Photoshop though, if you don't go as a smart object, then you're going to have pixels which are going to be altered whenever you make any changes to it, and then you're not going to be able to get back to that raw. So just part of the workflow to keep in mind. Again, I like to open as a DNG, open as a smart object, because then that allows me the flexibility to go back at any time. And we're going to do a little bit more of that in a bit here. But I just wanted to give you that kind of primer on opening as a smart object. I'm just going to close this file. I'm not going to save it. And let's take a look at another photo in here. Let me go back over to PureRAW. Let's make that nice and big again. Let's get out of the preview in here. And let's start looking at some different photos to see some of the advantages of working with this. So we just saw a pretty good noise reduction on this photo and nice distortion correction. But let's look for some other examples. This one here is probably going to blow your mind. This is my brother-in-law's wedding. This is, you can see from the thumbnail, it's a black and white. If I spacebar it, it opens up in color when I hit the spacebar to preview it because it's looking at the raw file. But you can see by the thumbnail that it was black and white, which is because I had the camera set to black and white. However, because it was raw, the embedded JPEG is black and white, but the original picture is in color. And you can see just by me opening this up here, we're now seeing a base level Apple decode, if you will. And you can see there's not a whole lot of good colors in there. It's very underexposed. It is super, super grainy. But you know, that's what the photo is. Okay. All right, let's drag this into here. Let's add this one into PureRAW. And it tells me what it was shot with. This was a GX80 slash GX7 slash GX85. So it was the same camera model across 3 different markets with the Leica 15mm f1.7 lens. Great lens. Okay, so that's ready to go. I'm going to download that. You can see it's a very small file. It downloads very quickly. And again, once you've downloaded it for that particular camera and lens combo, you'll never have to do it again. I'll click Save. With that photo selected, I'll click on Process Photos. I'm going to leave everything at the default, click on the Process button, and let this tear through. By the way, I want to remind you folks that we are, well, it looks like I quit my browser, so I'm not seeing the questions. We are answering questions if you have them. If you drop them into the comments area, those are going to be pulled into a form for me, which I am now opening because I somehow quit my browser, and I will be able to see whatever questions you guys might have. All right, this is done. I'm going to go ahead and click on View Results. We're going to see a side-by-side in here, and this is just remarkable. I mean, this is an incredible side-by-side comparison. Look at the skin. Am I at 1:1? Let me go in a little bit closer here. Look at the skin. Look at the noise and the shadows, the sharpness of the skin. I mean, here you can barely see her face. It's like a whole bunch of pixels and that's it. But there we have the bride. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. So this is an extreme, but man, this is good stuff. The results that you can get out of here are absolutely fantastic. All right, I'm going to jump over to the questions here and see what's happening here. All right, first question. Will this app help with drone images? I use Mavic Pro 2 with a much smaller sensor than my Nikon D850, for example. As long as you're shooting DNG, and I know that the Mavics do shoot DNG, then yes, you can. To know if your specific drone or any camera is supported, go to, I believe this is the right URL, and I'm sure Lori can drop the correct URL into the chat for you. I believe the URL is dxo.com/supported-cameras. Pretty sure that's right. That will show you a list of all the cameras that are supported by PureRAW and Ergo Photolab. If you, when you go to that page, you can just type in your camera, it'll narrow it down. You go, oh, there it is, and you type in DJI or Mavic, and it'll narrow it down. I know some of them are, I don't know if all of them are, I have no idea if your model is, but by all means, yes. The short answer is yes, it certainly can help, especially because, like you said, it's a small sensor. If you're shooting in any kind of lower light, that image is going to be pretty noisy. So that will certainly help things out there. And also because you're shooting on a flying camera, odds are you're not doing a very long exposure, which means that you're going to have a higher ISO to have that shorter exposure time in low light. So yeah, by all means, it should definitely be an advantage to you. Next question. PureRAW will not work on my old photos. They were shot with a Leica R9 with the DMR digital back. Okay, the files out of the camera are DNG, but PureRAW will not process them. Can this be fixed or gotten around? So I don't know. I'm not familiar with that particular camera, of course, but again, you can check the list to see if it is supported. If it's an old digital back, that sounds like a very kind of, I want to call it fringe use, but it's not going to be a very common use case. So it is unlikely that it will ever be supported. What you can certainly do, however, is on that same web page that has the supported cameras, at the very bottom of the page, there's a button that says, is your camera not supported? Click here to request it. And DxO does prioritize based off of requests. And I always like to tell people this isn't just for camera support requests for DxO, but for any software you use, anytime you have a problem, tell the manufacturer. Don't assume that they already know, because they might know, but if they don't hear about it from people, they're like, nobody seems to care, so we're not going to bother fixing it. But as with any software bug, or in this case, a camera that needs to be supported, the more that DxO hears that a particular camera wants to be supported, that the customers want a particular camera to be supported, the more likely they are to do it, the higher on the priority list it'll go. So this is really important. I know a lot of people have been asking about shooting RAW on their iPhones, and I think Android phones as well. I'm an iOS user, so I'm not totally sure, but I know with iPhones, you have the Apple Pro RAW, whatever it's called, the Apple RAW that you get out of your iPhone. That is not currently supported. DxO is aware that there is interest in that, and yet the more people that ask for it, the more people that go to that site and click on the button and say, hey, I want this, the more they'll prioritize it. So please, by all means, do that for sure. Anyway, so the short answer is if it's not supported now, I would say it sounds like a pretty old combination, unless that's something new I'm just not aware of. It's probably pretty unlikely that it would get supported. And no, if it's not supported, there really isn't a workaround. For this system to work, the camera, first of all, there's a couple of things. The software has to know exactly what camera and lens it was shot on. So if that metadata isn't there, then this doesn't work, which is why this doesn't work for scans, and it doesn't work if you're using adapted analog lenses. So if you've got I shoot with a lot of old film lenses. So like I'll shoot on my Lumix S5, which is a full frame camera, new full frame camera, but I'll put on old vintage Canon lenses and Pentax lenses and just old adapted lenses. Those lenses don't have any electronics. The camera has absolutely no idea what lens is on there. So that means the software has absolutely no idea what lens is on there. And there's no support for it. That can't be processed through there. You have to have the metadata from the camera and the lens in there, which for the vast majority of shots, the vast majority of what you guys are doing, that data is there. If you're shooting with any reasonably modern camera with any reasonably modern lens, that metadata is there. It's kind of a fringe case where it's not there, but it's important to know that in those cases it doesn't work. Okay, so with that said, let's say there's no other questions popping up right now. If you do have questions, again, drop them into the comments and we will get those questions answered as best we can. And in the meantime, let's just move on. So again, here you're seeing this just absolutely incredible. I mean, it just blows me away. The difference in this is really, really remarkable. Okay, I just wanted to show that one because it's just so good. All right, let's see here. Let's look at another photo. I'm going to take which was it? This one next. So this photo here, drop this in. This is a quite a wide angle lens. This is a 7 to 14 millimeter aspherical lens. So the aspherical tells us that the camera manufacturer, this is a Panasonic lens, has been very much designed to minimize distortion around the edges, but at this wide of a focal length, there's no avoiding. There's going to be some distortion. Also on the GX80/GX85. Okay, let's download that. In this particular photo, there's something around the edges that I want to show you. Let me just open this up first without processing it. I'm going to zoom in here to the edges of the file. And I want you to look closely around the edges here in the bright spots. You can see, so I get my mouse close to the edge, the little next arrow pops up as a little shadowing. So just look to the right of my mouse. You'll see under the tree branch in there, there's a bit of purple fringing happening. That is chromatic aberration. That is very common to find when you've got a very bright spot against a very dark spot, especially an image like this, especially around the edges. You get this really dark tree, the really bright sky, the basically blown out pure white sky, and you get that purple fringing, that chromatic aberration. So what I want to do is see if we can get rid of at least some of this. So with that selected, process photos, let it process through, and let's see how this works. We will look at a workflow of doing this through Lightroom. I guess I'll go and do that next and show you what happens if you've got a photo in Lightroom that you want to process, because you're already managing your photos there. For now, of course, we've been taking things from just out of the Finder and opening them up into PureRAW. Okay, let's go to 1:1 here. I'm actually going to get out of the split view so I can just toggle it on and off. So there's the original and there's the cleaned up version. So original and cleaned up. Look at the difference in the chromatic aberration, the purple fringing around these. Let me go ahead and switch it to split view, and I'll just let the mouse sit there kind of halfway through, and you can see the split there. That is incredible. That is really, really beautifully handled. So a lot, pretty much all, I can see a tiny bit of it still hanging out, but pretty much all of that purple fringing is gone. That's huge. That's a really, really important part of working with this tool and being able to get rid of things like that come off of kind of less than great lenses. That 7 to 14 millimeter lens, it was not one of the greatest lenses that Panasonic ever made. And so we get some of that purple fringing, but with software like this, we can remove it. Look at the sharpness too. Let's kind of go back to the center of the frame here. I'll just park the before and after in the middle. I wonder if it's, I guess because I have my screen so high resolution, it's looking like a little bit higher resolution than we want it to be, but I think that's just because I have my screen blown way up. But you can see a very dramatic sharpness difference between the left and the right-hand side of the images in there. Look at the people down here, the buildings down there, the trees, the texture and the foliage and so on. It really, really is a remarkable difference in there. So that was one of the things I wanted to show. And you can also see, let me go back to the, let's see here, get out of the split view. Go back to full screen, there we go. As I toggle this on and off, you're again seeing that big distortion correction difference. So there's the before and there's the after. So a lot of pin cushioning being removed from there and giving you a superior result. So again, it all is all about making those images better, making those images a bit better. All right, I'm gonna go open up another image in here and then we'll go into a Lightroom workflow. So which photo, where was it? I wanted to use, all right, this one here. So I'm gonna take this photo and drag this one in. Let's see what this was shot with. This was shot on a Canon 1DS Mark III with the Canon 14mm lens. So this is very interesting. Remember the first photo, which one was it? This one down here, scroll down, but that photo down there, the software was not sure which lens it was. In this case, it is. So remember this photo down here was a 5D, either Mark I or Mark II, I don't remember. I think 5D Mark I. Yeah, I'm sure it was a 5D Mark I. So it was a 5D Mark I, original 5D, and this same lens, 14mm lens. I know it's the same lens because I own that lens and I never owned the 14mm Mark II. In this case, it knows exactly which lens it is on the Canon EOS 1DS Mark III. What this tells us is that the 1DS Mark III captured much more metadata about the lens than the original 5D did. That's why we're seeing the difference there, which is really kind of interesting to see. Okay, we download that file, click on the save button, and there she is. We're gonna grab that, process that, and while that's processing, I'm gonna turn the camera back on and answer a question that just came up. This question is about workflow with Lightroom. Okay, I wish there was an easier way to bring RAW files from my Lightroom film strip into PureRAW. I've been using Bridge as a workaround because it supports drag and drop into PureRAW. Your thoughts? I am going to assume that you are, where's my camera frozen? I'm going to assume that you are on Windows because Windows does not have the drag and drop interface, but let me show you a couple of different workflows that you can do and we'll see how that goes. So I will answer your question by showing you a couple different ideas. All right, we are, let's see, back in PureRAW. The image has been processed. I'm just going to go ahead and export this. We're going to take this one straight into Photoshop. And once again, of course, we are in the, in the ACR, in Adobe Camera Raw. We can see, actually, you know, let me go back to PureRAW real quick. I want to compare this in here. Let's compare processing results. And what I want to see in here, let's take off the split, is how much distortion correction we're getting. So we're getting a bit of distortion correction. We are getting some devignetting, a little pin cushioning. The horizon line is straight on both of them, largely because the horizon was perfectly centered in the photo. Camera was actually held even for a change. It wasn't falling over. And how many of you feel like you're falling over every time you take a picture and your pictures are crooked, you don't know why? Raise your hands. So there's a good amount of correction happening for the distortion and for the devignetting. And I'm sure if we zoom in close here, we'll see some sharpening corrections. Let's zoom in close. Now this photo, this was shot, I remember, shot wide open. So we are definitely getting some softening around the edges. That's just inherent in this lens. And some of that has been corrected, but there's only so much you can do. You know, you can't refocus an image here, but we are getting better results, especially in the center on this. So, okay, so that's the better results. Let's go ahead and take this back over to Photoshop where we were. And I am going to leave this as it is right now. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up as a smart object. All right, so open this as a smart object. Now that this is in Photoshop as a smart object, I can do anything to this photo and not actually alter the pixels. So this is where I started earlier, and now I want to finish this thought process. So here's this photo. I'm going to open this in, I'm going to use Color Efex Pro 4 as a filter on top of it. Now the Nik Collection Color Efex Pro filter will act as a smart filter on top of a smart object. I've dismissed the dialog before, but by default it would pop up a thing saying, this image has been detected as a smart object. Would you like to apply this as a smart filter? And you go, thank you, and you know, on you go. And so what we're looking at now is the Color Efex Pro 4 interface. I'm not going to do a big demo of this. That's not why we're here today. I am going to apply a recipe. Let's see, here we go. Let's go into the recipes. I'm going to apply this one here called Blue Monday. Let's just apply this to start. Okay, so I like this, right? This is kind of cool. Let's do a little before and after on here. up here, before and after on here. There's the original, there's the color treated one. I'm going, yeah, I kind of dig that. That's kind of cool. All right, so let's go ahead and apply that. You can see over here on the right, there's a bunch of filters applied. There's a photo stylizer, cross processing, contrast, all applied here. Okay, cool. Yay, I like it. So I click OK. And let's just say I save the file. I close the file and I come back a week later and I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? I mean, look at all these shadows down here, man. Let me lift these shadows a little bit. That was kind of dumb. Probably could have brought this up a little bit more. And you know, sure, I can do that now, but I'd much rather have done that to the raw file. I would much rather have pulled up shadows in the raw file than be doing them to this already processed image. Well, remember, this is a smart object with a smart filter on top of it. So if I double click on the smart object here, as you saw earlier, that opens it back into Camera Raw. We can see the colors are not applied here because, well, obviously the colors are not applied to the raw file, right? They're applied on top of it. So now in here, I want to lift up my shadows. Let me just try the auto button and see what happens. Oh, that's pretty good, right? Auto button, pull down the sky, brought up the foreground. Maybe we'll bring up the foreground a little bit more. In fact, let's do this. I'm going to draw a linear gradient on this. Let's do it like so. And it's a bit much. We don't want to go carried away. Just want to bring up the foreground a little bit more in there. I like that. In fact, you know, I'm going to do the same thing on the top, but the other direction. I'm going to do a little bit of darkening just to add some real darkening to the sky in there. Kind of like that. It's kind of fun. You like it? I like it. I'm going for it. I'm going to click OK. It renders the raw back, still as a smart object, back into Photoshop. Then the smart filter gets re-rendered on top of that, and everything is non-destructive all the way top to bottom. And there's the new version of that image. So now I'm looking at it going, okay, that was really cool. But now I want to make a change to the smart filter. I can see some banding in here. Let's look at this at 100%. Yep, I can definitely see some banding in here. So that is because, well, this is an older camera. It's an older sensor, not the most modern sensor in the world. You know, I've added the gradient on the top. It's got a pretty strong gradient happening there. It's just, we're just getting some banding in there. There's just nothing, no two ways about it. We're getting banding. So I want to hide it. I want to get rid of that banding by adding a little bit of grain, add a little bit of digital noise, but as grain to this image. So I'm going to pop back into Color Efex Pro 4. And because this is a smart filter on a smart object, I have in here all the adjustments that I made earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new filter to this filter stack. I'm going to find film grain. There it is. And I'm going to actually move the film grain to the top of the stack. And so that happens first. So this, in case you're unaware, when you are working in Color Efex Pro, the image is processed by one filter at a time and is handed from one filter to the next. So the image comes into film grain, and then it's handed off to photo stylizer, then to cross processing, then to contrast only. So now with film grain, let's make sure we're looking at it 100% so we can truly see if there's banding. And what I want to do is have a little bit of noise in here, a little bit of grain, but just enough to break up that banding. And while we might not be able to get rid of it 100%, we can certainly reduce it a lot. And if you print this, then that should bleed together quite nicely, and it will probably look like there's no banding at all. So that's cool. All right, we're going to go ahead and apply that. Hit OK. This process is back, and bada bing, bada boom. There we go. We've got our processed photo. Again, I can go all the way back to the raw, DNG raw, and see that main source in there, make changes to this, or not, and just continue to work on it here in Photoshop. So it's just such a powerful workflow. Okay, I want to go over to Lightroom. Let's go to Lightroom Classic here. And let's see here, I'm actually going to add the same series of folders that I've just been working in here. Where are we? This is today. Is that what I'm working with? Yep, that's today. Let's choose this. I'm going to import all these photos. And, oop, it's not today. I lied. Let's get the right one. Shoot, let's cancel that. Sorry, I grabbed the wrong folder there. Allow me to, let's try that again. Going to add folder. To add, where are we? What is today's date? Today is 5/4. There we go. There's the right photos. No, is today 5/4 or 11? Today's the 4th. Okay. Click choose. And there we go. Okay, I don't want any of the DNGs. If any of the DNGs are showing up, I don't want to bring those in. No, we're not looking at the subfold. Oh, we are. There we go. Let's get rid of that DNG and get rid of that DNG. That's fine. Okay, I'm going to import. So this is, I'm just, normal Lightroom import. There's our Lightroom photos. Okay, so I'm in Lightroom now. I want to process, let's say, this photo here. There's a couple of things that we can do. So this is Lightroom Classic on Mac OS. There's a really neat little trick in Lightroom Classic for macOS, which is not supported on Windows, sadly. This is the trick that, well, when our guest asked how you would get this over with drag and drop. On macOS, drag and drop does work. I just click this, Command Tab over to PureRAW and drop it in. And there we go. There's the camera lens it was shot with, download that selection, and we now have that ready to go. So that's one workflow. That's the drag and drop workflow. Let's say that you don't have that option because you're on Windows. The easiest way to do it, let's do this photo here. So actually, which photo do I want? There's two photos that are very similar in here. And actually, we're going to take this all the way through. Let's take a close look at this photo before I process it. We are seeing very, very dark, very grainy. I'm looking for the sharper of the two, and I'm going to go with this one. I'm going to say this one's slightly sharper. This was shot, as I recall, quite slow. You have 1/10 of a second, so there's definitely some motion blur happening in there. Or do we want to go this one because that one's got better fire? Let's go for this one. It's got better fire. This is the image that I want to process. Okay, so that's this one here. I don't have drag and drop because I'm on Windows. Here's the easiest workflow. Right-click, Show in Finder, or of course in Windows it would say Show in Explorer. Select that. There's the photo. It is selected. Now I can drag and drop this over to PureRAW. So I would Alt-Tab over to PureRAW, drop that in, and let's see, we need to download the module for that. Click Save, and now that image is in PureRAW. So that's where the drag and drop comes in. No, you can't, if you're on Windows, you can't drag and drop straight from Lightroom. That's a Mac thing, but right-click, Show in Explorer in your case, and then there it is already selected, and drag and drop it over. I wonder if I do multiples. I'm not even sure what'll happen here. Let's say I take these two images here. I say, no, I can't select multiples this way. So perhaps that's the workflow that the person who asked the question was concerned with, doing multiples. So in that case, you would have to just reveal one and then make the selection of the other photos in here, which I fully understand is not going to be ideal, but that is how you have to do that. Okay, so where were we? I wanted to go back over to PureRAW. I want to process this photo. Let's see what we get out of it. Click on the Z process button, let it go through and do its thing. And let's see what we get out of this one. In the meantime, let's take a look at the questions that are popping up over here. I noticed that PureRAW defished my I like that. Defished my fisheye image. What's going on with my camera? I guess I can't turn my camera back on. I'm assuming you guys don't see me because first it locked up and now I'm not seeing anything. So I guess we're done looking at me. It says people can see you. Okay, I don't understand. I think my my camera interface has decided to stop working. Anyway, I noticed that PureRAW defished my fisheye image. Is there a way I can selectively disable that? There is. That's a great question. I will show you that. Is there a way to maintain metadata and keywords applied in Lightroom when using PureRAW? Ooh, okay. Yes, let's go through that workflow. Lori, don't cross those questions out. I want to make sure they're still up there. The last question up here now is, are the results in PureRAW sharper than out of Photolab 4? So in Photolab, you could, I think you can selectively turn the sharpening down, which is not an option that you have in PureRAW. It's on or off. One is, it's not even, the sharpening is not on or off, just the whole raw processing is on or off. Basically, you're processing it. So you can't selectively turn that down. I know that is a common request. I don't have any response or feedback for you on if or what or why or how that may or may not happen. All I can say is that that is a known question, whether you can control the sharpening. To simply answer the question, are they sharper? They are not sharper, assuming you leave everything at default, but in Photolab, you do have some additional control. Okay, so let me finish this, and then I'm gonna go answer those other two questions. So processing is done. Let's view the results in here. Let's go into 100%. And okay, look at her face in there. Again, it's a soft image to begin with, but wow, look at the level of noise difference between these two. The fire looks really nice and clean. It's, this is the noise on the cauldron. There is very, very noticeably different. Pretty cool. Okay, so there's the image processed. Right now, let's go ahead and send this image back to Lightroom to complete this workflow. So I export to application. We are going to send this to Lightroom Classic. There's an option here to export original raw files as well. I don't need to do that because the original raw file is already there, but if it wasn't, then I would choose that. I'll click on export, and this takes us over here to Lightroom Classic. It takes us to the import dialog. This is not some fancy plugin, it's just the import dialog with that image already selected. I click on import, and it's going to show up in the non-files. I have a DNG conversion enabled. I need to turn that off. It opens that up. Previous import, there we go. And if I go down and I look at the folder, which was, which was it? This demo photos, which demo photos folder I'm looking at anymore. There we go. This one here. And let's see here. There's the DxO images inside of it. Let's make sure that show photos and subfolders is on. And we should be seeing these two side by side, but I have completely lost the plot on here and I don't know what happened to my DNG file. So what did I do? PureRAW. Well, now I'm just confused. I don't even know what just happened here. Did I not import it? I think, because I had that DNG selected. Anyway, let's try that again, but this time we'll do it right because I broke something because I had some other option enabled. Let's try this workflow again. I'm going to take, did I already bring that photo over here? I did. Let's take this out of here. So let me just remove this image. I think I'd already brought in a DNG. Well, anyway, let's go through this workflow. There's the picture. I select it, select it, option drag, or just drag over to PureRAW. There it is. It's already downloaded the profile. We'll go ahead and process this. So that's a CR2. Make sure we got it right this time. That is selected. We click on the process, leave it at its default settings, let it process this. And once that's done, we are going to export to Lightroom Classic. Export that. Opens up. I had this enabled. See, I had this copy as DNG. That's what messed things up. That was from last week when someone asked a question about converting to DNG. That was still left on. Okay, so this is set as add. There's that image that I'm adding in. I click on import and it adds it into the database. There it is. And if I go back to my original folder, which was here, we now see the two photos side by side. So there's the original CR2, the original raw file, and arrow over to the altered one. So you can see huge difference in there. Let's zoom in close. Take a look at the noise levels in the sky in here. Look at the noise in the bokeh balls. That's very, very noticeable in there. Look at the shadow details here, on his jersey. Very noticeable. Look at the sharpness of his face. Huge details, better color as well. It's just a remarkable difference in there. So yeah, so there's how that whole workflow works. Okay, let me answer the two specific questions. So first one was, I noticed PureRAW defished my fisheye. All right, let me see. I don't think I had a fisheye in here, but I do have one. Give me just a second here to pull up a fisheye photo. I am sorry I can't turn my camera back on. I don't know what happened there, but let's see here. Give me just a moment here. I'm looking for a fisheye photo that I had exported earlier. It's not there. Let's look in here. I think in here I'll find one. And nope, not there. Okay, I lied. Let's try another folder here. Nope. I know I've got one in here. Sorry, I'm just digging through some folders of exported photos in here, looking for a fisheye. I know I've got one. Come on, I know I've got one handy here somewhere. Oh, I know what I can do. I know where to look for one. Will this shortcut work? Yes, okay, there we go. That shortcut still works. So this photo here, this big blue hole photo, this is a good example. Let me make sure this is not already in here. That is, let's get rid of that. In fact, we'll just get rid of all of this. So we're starting from scratch here, back to PureRAW. Okay, this photo right here, this big blue hole is shot on a fisheye lens. Let's go ahead and drag this one in. And you can see here, Canon 15mm fisheye. Okay, download that. Save. Okay, so here's the question, the concern, the problem. If I process this photo as it is, we'll go ahead and let it process through. It is going to, as the question asked, I love the way this is phrased. PureRAW defished your fisheye. It is defishing the fisheye. That is correct. So defishing the fisheye is part of the lens profile that is being applied to this. So you can already see how it has kind of flattened things out in the image up here. So we're just going to view the results. And now if let's turn off the split preview. If I do a before and after, there's the fisheye version, there's the defished. And this is the kind of photo where it was shot on a fisheye lens intentionally to get that cool fisheye look, which is now gone, which is very unfortunate. But now this particular photo is not high ISO, but let's just say that you wanted to still get the denoising, but you didn't want that defishing to happen. So let's go do this. Can I reset? I think if I just reprocess it. Yeah, I'm going to reprocess it, and that'll throw away the old DNG, I think was what's going to happen. Anyway, here's how this works. With that image selected, I'll go to the DxO modules. Actually, the image doesn't have to be selected, but I go to DxO modules, and I look for that module, which was the 15 mil. Where was I? Well, that's strange. Oh, I need to scroll up. Where is it? Hold on a second. Hold on 1 second here. DxO modules. It's not there. Oh, here we go. I don't know why it wasn't selected first time. What is going on here? It should be showing. It's not that one. Was it that one? I guess it might. No, I don't think it was that one. I do apologize. I don't know what's going on here. I should be seeing that camera lens selected here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to clear all of these out. Let's just kind of start this over. I'm not quite sure why that happened that way. Let's bring this one back in. We still see that it's got the DNG. DxO modules, there we go. There's the module. So I don't know why it wasn't showing me that module before, but now we're seeing it. So that's selected. There's the module. I click on none. So he says, select the equipment used to take bigbluehole.crt. That's that photo. I'm going to set it to none and save. And now when I process the photo, we'll go ahead and let it process still using DeepPRIME. It is going to reprocess that photo and is not going to apply the lens module. So it's not going to apply the distortion. I think it's worth pointing out at this point and this is just kind of driven home by that little weirdness that I just had. PureRAW is not an asset management tool. It is not meant to store all of your photos. You drag some in, you do your processing, you clear your thumbnails, and you go on to the next batch. So it's worth noting. Okay, let's view the results in here. Now we see that I have the denoising. Again, this is not a high ISO photo, so there's no real denoising to note, but the defishing has not been done. So that's what's happening here. So that's how you do it. You go in to the DxO modules and you simply disable it, and you can go back and re-enable it and save it, and then it'll go. You know it's disabled because if that is disabled, you'll see a little the camera with a little slash through it there. It tells you that it's off. If I turn that back on, then boom, it's back on again. So there's that. Okay, let's see here. We're getting close to the end of time. The earlier question was, is there a way to maintain metadata and keywords applied in Lightroom when using PureRAW? Okay, so if we go over to Lightroom, and let's see, I'm going to use this photo. So let's say this photo, let's see here, we're going to add a bunch of stuff. I'm just going to name it like my title, my caption, my copyright. That's good enough. And then keywords. I haven't used Lightroom. I don't use Lightroom Classic on my day-to-day anymore. So here we go. Keywords. Here we go. We're going to call this Thailand. And is that? I guess that's it. I guess that's actually added. Is that actually added now? It must be. Go to another photo, back. Yep, okay. So it's got that title. Oh yeah, there we can see it's already added there. We'll add another one. iStock. I'm gonna pretend that I can sell this to iStock. Ha, funny. Okay, so I've got keywords applied and I've got some metadata here applied. I look into this photo and I do some adjustments. Let's go into the develop module and I go, yeah, I don't know, let's just do a little auto adjustment on here. What am I looking for? Here we go, auto adjustment. No, I don't like that at all, actually. Let's undo that. That was terrible. Let's take our black point down. Let's make the background a little bit darker. Maybe pull the highlights down just a touch. Shift my white balance a little bit. Nope, actually, I kind of liked it the way it was. Let's go back a little bit warmer. Yeah, I don't know. Let's crop it too. Let's do a square crop. So I'm just doing a bunch of stuff with it. That's all I'm doing here. All right, square crop, push it over. There we go, Instagram friendly. Okay, so there's my image. And then I'm going, man, there's a lot of noise up here in the shadows. A little noise on here in the skin. I really wish I had a better, cleaner version of this photo. So let's see what PureRAW can do. All right, so there's my photo. I'm going to grab and drag that straight over to PureRAW, drop that in. It downloads. Let's see, what is this? This is shot on a 70 to 200 f4 lens. Download the selection and save that. And let's take that image and process everything at default, process. And once that's done, we're going to send this back over to send this back over to Lightroom, and we're going to see what has or has not been brought with it. Export to Lightroom Classic, hit the export. Final step, let it add it to the database, and we are good to go. There it is. Okay, so back to, which was it, this one? Yeah, there we are. All right, so there's the one that I had done. There's the CR2. Look down, you see it says .cr2. Go over to this one, and there's the DNG. Okay, let's see what's been carried over. First of all, the crop has obviously not been carried over. Okay, this is something we see. Sometimes the crop goes, sometimes it doesn't. As I go back and forth between these, we can see that in this case, none of the adjustments are carried over. And I actually know why now. I have learned this. And now let's go to the library and let's see here. There's my edited one, and we go to the other one, and those are all gone. Okay, so now we're going to redo this process. Let me go in here and let's remove that photo from the database. I'm actually going to delete it from the disk entirely. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to say save metadata to file. Because it's a raw file, it actually saves it as an XMP on the side. Depending on your settings, I think in Lightroom you can have it set to automatically do that after a process. I don't know exactly, but I think sometimes it automatically does it. But now that that's been saved, if we go through this process again, I believe, I'm going to clear these out, and let's make sure that the DNG is actually gone out of here. I did tell it to delete from disk, but yep, it's gone. Okay, so now we take that, we're going to drag this over to PureRAW. The module's already downloaded, so we're not going to have to redo that. Process this again. And now through this workflow, I believe by telling Lightroom to save the metadata, that all of the changes should be there. I think. So let's find out. And export to Lightroom Classic, export, and add that back to the database. And yep, we can already see some of it is, at least because the crop is there. Let's go back to this. So there's our two photos. There's the .cr2. So I'm looking down here. It says CR2. There's the DNG. Let's open this one. Let's just go straight to the DNG file. And we look, yep, sure enough, there we go. There's my title. There's my caption, my copyright, the keyword. Yep, the keywords are there. And if I look at the develop module, all of my adjustments are there as well. So that's the magic ticket. That's your golden ticket. With that file selected, go and save the metadata. So where did it go? Wherever it was, photo, save metadata to file, and that should do it. Now I wonder if you could read it later. We're kind of running out of time here, but that'd be interesting to see if you could read it later, because the DNG, the metadata is embedded in it. It's not a sidecar file, so that might not work. I was just thinking if you could write the metadata afterwards. Let's just try it. Here, this is what I'll do. I'll take this image. That's the CR2, that's the DNG. I don't think this is going to work, but let's just try it. Let's crop this. My goodness, my stomach is going crazy. Let's crop this. We'll add some changes to it. I don't know, I'm just going to, whatever, make some changes to it. Let's do this. Let's make it a totally different color temperature so we know that it's been changed. Okay, there. And I will go to library and add the keywords. This is the Race Across America, so RAM. We're going to add that in, and we're going to do one more down here. Caption Ram baby. Okay, there we go. That's there. Now if I save that, which Command S, by the way, is the keyboard shortcut. Yep, Command S, save metadata file. Go to this one and read. Is it going to? I don't think it's going to, but let's see what happens. That'd be so cool if it did. Read metadata. Nope, it doesn't, because it is a separate file, so it's not reading it from there. So you do need to do that. Now you could copy and paste it though, right? So I can go here and hit Command C. Nope, well, I guess we have to go to the develop module. Hit Command C, copy all the settings that we want, copy, and then go over here and hit Command V, paste, and that'll paste those settings in. I believe you can do that with the library metadata. Yeah, there's a sync setting, so you could sync the metadata across later as well if you needed to do that. Sync settings, not totally sure how this whole thing works, but I know the syncing will allow you to sync some metadata over, so that should do it as well. But your best trick is to save the metadata first and then move on. Okay, last question, and then we're going to wrap this thing up because we are at the end of time. As you process from Lightroom into PureRAW, that sounds to me as a double raw processing, isn't it? Okay, excellent question. I wish I could turn my camera back on so I could look you guys in the eye while I tell you this, but for some reason, it's just not working. Oh well. No, you're not double raw processing. So if you go from Lightroom over to PureRAW, you are not sending to PureRAW. You are not taking the image that was already processed in Lightroom and opening that in PureRAW. You are sending the original raw file, the untouched raw file, into PureRAW. PureRAW then does what it does. It does its raw processing and hands that back to Lightroom. Now at that point, it is a partially processed raw. It has been decoded. It has had the defringing, the demosaicing, the denoising, and all of that done to it. But remember, as I was saying in the beginning, it does not have the color processing. Now, a DNG already has, by its nature, the DNG already has all that work done to it. Lightroom obviously knows that it's a DNG and it doesn't start from scratch. Now so it leaves off things like the denoising, the demosaicing, and so on. Now what you can get yourself into is a case where you force it to double process. So did I bring that? Oh, I guess the fisheye is not in here, but if I go to this file here and I went into the develop module, and this is the DNG we're looking at, and I added the lens correction capabilities from here, then that would be double process. It's not double raw process, but the lens profiles would be double applied, and the end result would not be attractive. It would not be a good end result. So you don't want to do both the ones that are in Lightroom plus the ones that are natively coming out of PureRAW. But by default, that's not going to happen. Even if you had applied it to the base raw file, when you send that over, PureRAW ignores that, processes it without it, and sends it back. So that's how that works. Okay, that's it for the questions. That's it for time. Apparently that's it for me because I can't even show you my face to say goodbye. But thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in today. Let me just remind you, I'll bring up my slides here real quick. So thanks a bunch, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in today, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.